without any further ado, we'll hop right in. So that's going to be the main focus of our conversation today is how we make security and the safety that comes along with that a team sport. And we have Bill along here with myself to kind of walk us through some of that.
Good afternoon, Ryan. It's so good to be here right now.
So Bill, could you start telling us right as we get into it here, a little bit of your background and experience in just the world?
So I started, before law enforcement even, I guess, I started my career in this type of a world in the Marine Corps. And in that environment, I was assigned to a nuclear weapons facility. So at the age of 19, I really didn't realize what I was getting introduced to, but limited access facilities, controlled access points, pass and badge type things, those were all, Course 80's technology. Then I went into the world of law enforcement. I spent just a few years there, about 32 years there. But during that process, I found myself working for a lot of my local schools, primarily my children's school first, but some faith-based organizations, some places that really weren't being touched by public sector, if you will, to help them do some critical management and planning. And that's kind of led me to where I'm at right now. I found a love for it. And I find a really deep need for it that a lot of times people don't always see, as we say, some of the holes in the fences. So I still enjoy doing this kind of work and helping other people feel like they're safe when they're in their home, at work, and in their travels.
No, that's fantastic. And that's why we're here having this conversation today, to learn from your experience and expertise. And to just give a little background on mine as well for everyone here, I have in my past life a risk manager for senior living companies, specifically anything policy procedure wise that we could do to help mitigate our risk, to keep everyone not just safer, but really save money in the long run and not have to deal with some of the issues that do occur once an incident or an emergency does occur. And then if it does, how do we prepare and react to that to make sure everyone stays safe, secure, and keeps the business going? And currently I serve as the Director of Customer Engagement at AccuShield. If you are familiar with us, we are a visitor management and safety and security platform that shows who is in the building and a lot of different other things that we'll touch on when we go from there. But my role is to help make sure if you are one of our customers, you're getting everything out of our system that you currently can, and how does it ingratiate into your community. So right from here again, we're back into interaction. We're doing another poll here. Do you believe that your community has a sufficient security policy, procedures, or the technology to get everything done that you would like to in that building? So we're going to throw another poll up right here. This one we won't wait as long as to get moving and discuss, but just something to kind of gauge where we're all starting. And Bill, could you start a little bit as people are getting warmed up here? Would you be able to explain for me the difference just between a policy and procedure? Just as we're kind of getting going.
Really good place to talk about that because, there's really two big differences here. We have a policy that maybe is something that's written down, something that's in your guidelines, your book, maybe even a security plan that you have in place. And then we have what we really know how things are done is the procedure. And everybody kind of understands that, well, I know that's what the book says, but this is how it's really done. And a lot of times when we're onboarding, we might even say that out loud to somebody that's new. It's like, well, listen, you're supposed to do it this way, but I'm going to tell you this is the best way to do it. In truth, when you get judged, when the things go really bad, when things get examined later, what you're going to be judged again is your procedure and did they match policy. And that's where we generally find the faults. I'll give you an example. Let's just say something simple. All exterior doors are supposed to be locked and secured so that there's a single access point during certain hours. Well, we know that's in the book, but we also know where the specific doors are that gives us our shortcut out to the parking lot, or that one door that's typically propped open by the little landscaping rock so we can go out there for a cigarette break, or whatever. And so those are, the difference between procedures, and we know this is how we really do it, and policy. And what we want to do is we want to make policy match procedure, so that we look at what's realistic. It might look great on paper, but when we talk to the people that are actually in the trenches that are doing it every day, they're going to say, yeah, that doesn't work. On paper it says, yeah, we'll move everybody in a half an hour, but in real life we know we cannot move everybody in a half an hour.
No. And I love what you said right there, Bill, about being realistic. And it's all about setting those expectations. Is yes, we want to shoot for the moon. We want to be the most secure we can possibly be, but we want something that's accessible for everyone to do as well. If it's not in line with what our staff are going to be able to do in a given day, it may not get done and it may not be happening. And when those emergencies and incidents do occur, are we going to be able to react the correct way and get all those steps done and do all the documentation that we may need? Or was it something that we could have been a little more realistic or pragmatic about and possibly avoided on the front end? And
Right.
that's really what we're trying to do today, I believe, with talking about not just a sufficient policy that covers you on the insurance or liability end, but how do we act and how do we change that behavior in the culture of our location itself, using sometimes those technology solutions to be able to become more safe and secure. We're going to hear those words a lot, I think, today: safe and secure.
That and the and raising awareness,
Yes.
because sometimes we don't even really know, what we're missing. So our first goal is, I guess, raising everybody's awareness to understand that these are maybe why our policies are in place. These are why these procedures are needed, and helping everybody and invest or become a stakeholder in the security process. That just because you do X, it doesn't mean that being aware of that visitor or being aware of that crack in the sidewalk or whatever that thing might be, that could be your job as well. So raising awareness of the concerns that you have in your community, the potential dangers, the potential pitfalls or liabilities that are there, and that's our big thing. The complacency comes in a lot of times because we get so routine. We get so daily with our function. This is just when we go through our thing. And it's nice to do these kind of, sessions because it kind of gets everybody motivated back up again. But it almost reminds us sometimes of how much apathy we really have in that process, that we're just like, in spite of the fact that we're all sitting right now in a security webinar, there's still that little voice inside your head that probably says, it's probably not going to happen to me. That's that apathy part of it, right? And so that's hurricanes happen, but they don't hit our place. Tornadoes happen, fires happen, those type of things. There's always something that happens someplace else to somebody else. Nobody gets up their day and says, looks himself in the mirror and says, today is my day. And we all kind of suffer a little bit from that apathy. The second part that I'm always concerned about is the denial side. And those are the two components of complacency that we want to talk about, or at least make ourselves aware of those so we can battle them. And denial side is the side that says, even though it is happening, and it's happening, everybody else can see it's happening, we're trying to convince ourselves it's not happening. And we say things like, I can't believe this is happening to me. Why is this happening to me? And the reason why that's so dangerous place to be is because you're wasting time trying to convince yourself it's not happening when you should be reacting.
Yeah.
And so if we can understand complacency, raise our awareness, and constantly battle that little voice in our head that says, it's not going to happen to me. I don't want to go into the world of paranoia. I want to stay in the world of caution. I don't want to get to the point where, behind every bush is a bad guy. But I also want to raise my awareness and say, I'm going to be ready so that if event X or event Y happens, at least we have something that this isn't so alien to me that I can respond to.
Yeah, no, perfectly, beautifully said. And that's what our main focus is going to continue to be today, is how do we gain awareness? We are going to touch on how we run vulnerability assessments and create a risk index, but we'll touch on those more later on in the series. We don't want to get too far in the nitty gritty today, when we're going to send out some tools that'll be available and to kind of help build those, and we can work on those together and really dig in there. But the focus of today is to gain that awareness like Bill was talking about, and start getting our gears spinning on how do we create that culture of safety and security without being fearful and without living in fear in every day, because again, we are all working in someone's homes, and we want to be aware of that as well. So this is what we're touching on today, the criticality of security in senior living. So one thing I'd like to kind of frame up here is, we know when we go to schools, just right off the beginning, if you've ever, visited one of your kids or even had a parent visit you at school yourself, everyone has to go through that front office. They have to get a name badge. They have to sign in. They turn over a license. They do all those things because we want to protect our school children. But oftentimes we forget about protecting another vulnerable population, which are our seniors. But one big difference between seniors and school kids is they don't live in the school. If you're a kid, they're living in communities. And when seniors live there, they are adults, meaning that they have money. They have valuables like family heirlooms, jewelry, those kind of things. And a lot of times they also have controlled narcotics. So all of these things that stack up together make them much more of a target than we would want to believe, because that's what our place of business. That's where we work. We don't view them as a target or a vulnerable population necessarily, because we're there every day. And as Bill was saying, when you get caught up in that just daily grind of you're clocking in, you're clocking out, you're going to work, you're taking care of people, you're doing everything you need to do, sometimes that awareness of security, especially in senior living, can seem like something that's not so important. Bill, any comments on anything like that?
Yeah, I want to say what we'd really call in my business is a senior living community is really what we'd say a soft target. It's almost like you could walk in and walk out and do whatever you want to do. And there's a mindset, if you're we'll just say bad guy for just a general overall thing. Bad guy might be natural disaster, weather, or some human wanting to do some bad acts. But so when bad guy shows up, typically if bad guy has any decision process in it, they're going to pick some place that least likely to get caught, most likely for success, okay, and to get in and out without having to confront anything. So give you an example of a hard target. I'm in the Tampa Bay area, and down here is MacDill Air Force Base, and at MacDill Air Force Base is a place called Central Command. Okay. That would be considered a hard target. You don't hear about bad guys trying to break into Central Command to steal things, to do active shooter events, because it's a very hard target. There's a very low likelihood that you're going to get in and out of there. Soft targets, schools, sometimes what used to be schools, we're doing better. Senior living communities, where again, like you said, there's something they're attempting, or there's something that's vulnerable. And there's very little either, offensive or reactive type security there. Maybe you've got a security team, maybe you've got a staff that has a polo shirt that says security. Most cases are probably not going to be armed. They don't have powers of arrest. They might have a little bit. In some of the facility or some of the communities that I've seen, they have maybe a stepped up presence, if you will. But more times than not, it's someone at a front desk, if that front desk is even manned. I can tell you stories about doing assessments, and we'll talk about vulnerable assessments like Ryan said a little bit later. But one of the things that I would do is I would walk into one of a location, a school, a church, where I was at a business. And I would start my assessment unannounced, and I would walk around for, moments, hours. Sometimes I'd time myself to see how long I'd be there before I'd be either addressed or, approached by somebody and say, hey, can I help you? Or, I also found that if I had a clipboard in my hand or if I had a traffic vest on, I could go anywhere I wanted to go, because we have an assumption that everything must be okay. And that's that apathy that we all kind of suffer from. And so, raising our awareness and understanding that you're in a soft target. You're in a soft target not only for crime, but also because of weather. You're at the mercy of your location, whether it be, I came from Michigan. We used to have snow days, loss of power, hurricane, severe weather, chemical spill, those type of things. Those are problems that you have to be worried about.
Absolutely. And our goal here today is not to instill fear. Our goal is to, just raise our awareness, as we keep saying, and keep going back to that. And not just for the good of our residents, but also for the reputation of senior living as a whole. very recently, as I'm sure many of you have heard, senior living's been in the news more and more as being the bad guy, or the people letting situations happen and letting different things occur. Very similar, some of you may have heard about the documentary on Paramount Plus. That's been something we've had a lot of conversations about, and how that we can, help avoid some of those situations going forward and help avoid the tragedy that many of these families have gone through, and the business expenses that come with this as well. Because in the end, we know we are here to keep their lights on, keep everything going, provide a home for someone that's safe, that's secure, that they want to live in, and do the same things for our staff that work there, as well as the families that visit. And it gets difficult to do if we just assume that it can't ever happen to us. We don't want to be scared of it. We don't want to be fearful of it, but we want to be prepared.
And you bring up an excellent point, Ryan, there, because we're not just talking about, our community members. We're not just talking about our residents. We're talking about our staff. We're also talking about all the vendors, all the visitors, the family that come to your property. The moment they step foot on your property, you have a certain degree of liability, of responsibility for them. And in our world today, liability has a capital L. And so the idea that you did not do something well enough, or just completely ignored and decided not to do something that caused, harm to somebody else or loss to somebody else, that's the kind of liability that closes these type of operations. Yes. And now people, like you said, now people have lost their homes. And so there's a cascading effect to this type of a thing,
Absolutely. It's and the very end of it, if it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense for our operations. And we want to invest to keep that community rolling, keep those lights on, and give you some more sense of security, that, peace of mind and well-being. That's what we're here for. And that's what we're talking about today. How do we set up a system and a culture that allows us to have that peace of mind?
Right.
And I think we've defined awareness pretty well here, Bill, if there's anything you'd like to add on.
Yeah, if we could maybe, I'm not sure where we're at, but I wanted to talk about the difference between prevention and preparation. Is this a good time to go there?
I think we'll go right to that after we talked about the importance of visitor awareness a little bit. Just wanted to tag that one more time so people talk a little bit about it. A lot of times we have families who enter our buildings who go, why do I have to sign in? I'm here, every day to see my mom. But if we just think about it for a moment, let's think about that every resident has 4 to 5 people between either home health, hospice, could be the podiatrist for all we know, or family members, friends that visit them. So now that's one person that has 5 visitors. Every resident is going to have those 4 to 5 visitors. So if we make that exception for one person in a 100-person community, are we making that exception for 500 people? So that's where we value the importance of visitor awareness. Do we trust, if we trust just one person, does that mean we trust every person? And Bill, anything to add on to that?
Well, listen, this is how I got involved with AccuShield years ago, because of what I was doing. And like I said, some of the other different organizations, from schools, churches, some businesses, the one big component that we were always missing was accountability for personnel, for people, for visitors, for staff, for, students, what have you. And really nobody that I was finding in the marketplace was doing what AccuShield was doing. And when I found out about AccuShield, I said, they've got the tool that we're looking for to sign people in, sign people out. We're not only just being able to sign people in, sign people out like you can do in a logbook, but also any given moment, if a first responder shows up to your location, your community, facility, whatever you call it, your campus, and says, I need to know how many souls are on place right now. Okay. How difficult is a task set to do unless you have AccuShield? When you do an evacuation, whether it be a fire alarm or an actual fire, or whatever the event is, how do you determine if everybody got out or who you're missing? And those pieces of information are things that first responders need right now, not in 4 days after we do a study on it. And so when I got involved with AccuShield, like I said, I found they were filling such a need, for the type of places that I was working for. I said, this is really almost the backbone of security. If you've got a porous environment where people just come and go as they choose, okay, you've lost all your accountability. and you've also increased your liability and responsibility for each one of those people. And that's not even talking about having a memory care or someplace like that where you genuinely need to know at a moment's notice who's on property right now. That visitor awareness, not only just knowing who comes through the door and when they leave, okay, it's also a great investigative tool post-event. Okay, the law enforcement investigators are going to come and start looking at a post-event thing. Let's just say a theft. We're going to want to know who had access, who was there. It's not going to be a handwritten logbook. It's not going to be, hopefully somebody was doing their job at the front desk and signing everybody in, especially when there was a rush of 3 or 4 people that all came at the same time. The vendor that shows up every other day, the Coke guy or the food vendor that we all know his name is Rob, and we say, yeah, come on in, Rob. He came in and left and nobody actually signed him in. And we all just assume that we know Rob's okay. But with a tool like AccuShield, investigators can go back and say, we know who came in, when they came in, what they looked like when they came in, and when they left. And that's I can't tell you how valuable it is to a post-event investigation. And so that awareness of who's on your property, who's on your dirt at any given moment, I don't know how you could operate without that tool in your bag.
Absolutely. There is a poll up before we move on that has, the question is, does your community have a comprehensive emergency preparedness plan? And so far, it looks like, yeah, we're locked and loaded for some of you guys, which is fantastic to hear.
I'm impressed.
Yeah, we're on the good end so far of things. And I think we'll give this another few seconds or so and then move on from there. Okay. So right after this, we're going to talk a little bit about, before we get into prevention versus, or being proactive versus reactive. In a moment here, we're going to talk a little bit about deterrence to bad actors. So we'll get ourselves thinking as we finish this poll up.
We're watching our numbers move around a little bit there on that, but as we talk about that comprehensive plan, that's probably to the eye of the beholder as well. But it's encouraging to me to see those kind of numbers at the top of the chart saying, yeah, we at least have something. That's good.
So what we're going to do here for a little bit is, a while ago, we sent out a poll to a whole bunch of different people, AccuShield customers, senior living operators, staff, the whole gambit. And we talked about, please rate each of these preventative measures based on how successfully they would deter bad actors from coming into a senior living community. And they were a little interesting. And we wanted to talk about what Bill said earlier on policy versus procedure and how this plays into this. So everybody said the number one deterrent of bad actors is auto locking doors and access control. On paper, fantastic. On paper, everybody who works there has a key fob that's only set to a certain time. They only come in a certain door, and we see everything. They walk by the cameras. We're great. We're good to go. But what happens, as Bill said earlier, that we have staff, from the kitchen. They take a smoke break. They prop a door open with a rock, or we have a resident who likes to come out of a different door from their apartments and back in on the side. Or we have those locks that we know sometimes the magnetics just don't work and we haven't gotten them fixed yet, and we know we have a hole in there. If we start counting the number of entrances and exits we have, they can get pretty up there in our senior living buildings. But until we start looking at each of those access points as a vulnerability, we're just check the box. We have an access control system. We either have electronic doors, or some people with master keys, some people without. And this goes right in with us to security cameras as well. Same idea. We're not, probably in my experience, constantly viewing and constantly watching security footage. It's more of, when something has happened, we go and review it. And we have to hope that CCTV was, connected to our Wi-Fi, the internet, are able to pull it up. The right person has the passwords to access it, among everything else. Were they even recording is a question that occurs. So what we believe at AccuShield is that security is a proactive measure. We'll touch more on this later. And that does start at the front desk with both either concierge or a security team sitting right up there. It doesn't need to be, an off-duty police officer who's there all the time and ready to make arrests at a moment's notice. But it's just having someone who owns that security process as part of their daily assignment. And that one person who's the go-to, as well as just instilling in every other person that is in there to be on guard, kind of like a see something, say something with the airport, which is where we'll talk a little bit more about name badging, where that factors into being proactive and how the digital sign-in log does as well. Bill, anything here or just kind of getting us warmed up?
And in that awareness side, let me make one more point because it keeps on coming to my mind right now. That door you talked about that's propped open, or that one that we know that unless you really kind of shove it, it doesn't always lock. It looks like it's closed, but it's not really locked. Be honest with yourself as you sit here right now listening to us. How many times have you walked past that door and you let it close in that rock and you didn't move that rock? Because you know where that door is at in your community right now. You know where that door is at, where that lock's a little bit sticky at, but you know that, or that's not my lane. That's not my job, And what I'm offering to you today is, it is your job. It's everybody's job to say, hey, this one isn't working right. Hey, this camera we haven't seen anything in this camera for 2 weeks. Is somebody going to look at this thing? Whatever it is, let's make it all of our job, because the more eyes we have out there, even if you do have that one point of contact, that one person that's your head of security or whatever you've titled that person. They can't be everywhere all the time. And so they're dependent on you to give them that feedback as well. But like I said, be honest with yourself right now. How many times have you went through that door and you left that little piece of mulch in the door because you said, well, somebody must need it open for something. Yeah. And you assumed everything was okay.
Yeah. Perfect. Beautifully said. A few things to touch on as well are, what are some of the biggest safety risks in our building? We reached out through a poll as well, and some of those that popped up were evacuations of residents in case of an emergency, medication management or medication management, residents wandering off the property, any elopements we may have to deal with, physical abuse from staff or caregivers, also neglect I would factor in as well, is a large risk too, and the bad actors coming in to take advantage. These are just some of the things that we've had wrote into us as risks we deal with. I know personally in my experience, I've dealt with multiple bad actors coming in, whether it's a family member who goes, sees mom or grandma and starts writing themselves checks, or it's someone who doesn't believe that mom needs to be in the community and they're actually a diabetic and they're taking them out for meals and doing whatever else. And you get back and they're dropped off and you have blood sugar crashing. And we didn't know who that person was with, where they had gone, or how this could possibly have gotten to this point. Using different sign-out processes and knowing who's in your community and who's taking them, and also preventing certain people from having access to the residents could help prevent some of those things, or at least mitigate some of them.
And that brings up an excellent point, Ryan. So one of the things we used to deal with in the schools, and I'm sure this is similar, is you have court orders or injunctions that maybe have limited someone's access to somebody. They've done a protection order, or they've done a domestic violence injunction, et cetera. It's an issued by the court piece of paper, but are you aware that that person has an injunction right now? When was the last time that was vetted? So like I said, those bad actors can take advantage, whether it be malicious intent, or maybe just, I just want to take mom out for a dinner and gave her the food that she wasn't supposed to have. But ultimately, who's responsible for that? I'll tell you the thing that probably keeps me, I love the first one there. Well, I don't love it. Evacuation of residents in emergency. If that doesn't keep you awake at night, I don't know what does, to be honest with you.
And it's what we talked about, is it's just as important to know who's in your building as who isn't.
Yeah.
If we have a resident that's out with the family and there's a fire, there's fire alarms going off, just sprinklers. And if we're looking for a resident who maybe is non-ambulatory and we're not able to find them, and we're searching, we're looking, we're putting, not just staff probably well-being at stake, but in some cases, if it is a large event like a fire, first responders as well.
So let's go a little bit into the weeds here. I won't go too deep into it because we're going to talk about the plan next month, writing the plan. Mm-hmm. But, a lot of our polls said that, they do have a comprehensive plan. I think we're up around the 50% mark there at one point in time. We were watching the polls. Does your comprehensive plan also involve your security once you leave your campus? 2 years ago down here in Florida, we had some pretty severe hurricane threats. And I know of several communities that were evacuated to hotels and into the central Florida area. Does your plan cover that? So now you've left and you've moved all your residents to a hotel. Who now is taking that plan with them? And do you have a plan for what we would do in the schools off campus for field trips, that sort of thing? Who's your emergency notification type thing? What are you going to take with you? That type of thing. So that plan needs to be a constant moving thing. It doesn't just mean when you're on your property. Shopping trips. We take our community vans to the local shopping center, and some of our residents can go with us. What's your off-campus emergency plan look like? So just something to whet your appetite to some of the things may want to have in your plan that is not.
And we're going to provide some tools to help not just assess those risks, but possibly work towards a plan as well. But also use your resources and your vendors already, meaning your commercial insurance company. I know everyone on here has one. When's the last time we spoke to them about how do they view your liability in case of an emergency? What resources do they provide you? They may have a set plan that they can give you right into your policies and procedures. Put your name on it, teach you how to train through it. And those may be resources we've never asked for. They're more than willing to provide because, insurance's role. They're there to help mitigate the damage if they can. They don't want to have to pay out $1 million when the loss could only be $100,000. So they're there to help you as a business. So we always want to remember that those resources are there, not just from us, but your insurance companies as well. And we want to take advantage of those because that's what it's all about, being proactive.
Right.
So this one, Bill, I know we touched on a little bit, but obviously this is always interesting to me.
I think the number of no is at 66%. I think that's low, to be honest with you. It's an uncomfortable thing to walk up to a total stranger and say, excuse me, you look lost. You look like a bad guy. You look like you need help, something, because we don't really know how to start that conversation, or even the next step is, or what, when we find out that they're not supposed to be here. And so sometimes in our human nature, it's easier to just avoid it. They look like important. They're wearing a nice dress shirt. They look like they're okay. Really, what we can do as communities to help our staff approach this better, we could probably give them a little bit of intro. We can give them a little bit of script, if you will. You can be pleasant. It doesn't mean you're being weak, but you see that person that doesn't have a name badge on. They don't look like anybody you've ever seen before, and there may be some places they don't look like they should be. Don't just assume that everything is okay. Okay. Don't just let that little voice in your head say, they're probably okay here. Maybe they just left their sticker at the door or whatever. Instead, go up to them and politely and pleasantly, at least confront them. What you're doing is you're telling that person, I see you, I know you're here. And I've now made eye contact with you. I've ID'd you. If this person is a bad person looking to do something, they know they've just been nabbed. They're leaving. Okay. You've maybe just interrupted something that we don't even know where it was going to go to. If they're genuinely lost, they really need help, then great. Now you're doing a really good job helping your community. But the leaders in that community can help your staff by giving them some sort of a script or an idea, or at least a little bit of training. Nobody likes to do role playing training, right? But at least something so that they feel comfortable walking up to somebody and saying, excuse me, you're not supposed to be in this hallway. Can I help you find where you're going to? Are you here to see somebody? And then verifying those things: what room number, what name, what person, what organization are you with that says you should be here? Otherwise, we're going to make sure we watch you walk off this property. Or I'm going to call someone who can deal with it, more appropriately. But knowing what to do, well, first of all, what to say, but then knowing what to do when you don't get the answers that you need to get.
And we're all in the business of hospitality if we're in senior care. So we all know we want to provide a good experience for resident staff and families. But this can fold right into that. There's no reason that part of our script that we have can't be, oh, hello, great to meet you. Who are you here to visit? Can I get you something to drink? And then what we do from there is we actually have a policy where everyone signs in at the front desk. Did you come in from a side entrance, perhaps? Let me walk you to the front desk and help you get signed in, or grab someone who can help you with that. And my policy was always with my communities where if you are not comfortable saying something, find a supervisor who's comfortable as well.
Right.
What we also did is it's a team sport. Security and awareness is a team sport. So bring residents in on it. There are more than enough residents who are comfortable and happy and thrilled in some cases to be deputized, to watch that building, to be, the security czar, the guard of the location. So bring them in on it. Let them know that here's our policy here, and help us stay in check and create that culture of community where it is their home. Let's give them some empowerment over their own home.
I like that. It's like your neighborhood watch in your community, right?
Exactly.
That's fantastic. I love that.
Just like that. And this is where we're going to now, Bill, prevention versus preparation.
Yes. This is, I love this slide and I love this conversation because, I mentioned to you, I'd been in law enforcement for about 32 years. And prior to that, I was in the Marine Corps, and literally my job was I guarded nuclear weapons. It sounds much more sexy and glamorous than it really was. But the point of it, though, is that throughout all that career, I loved the word prevention. That was my job, crime prevention, drug abuse prevention, domestic violence prevention. You could throw anything you want in there was prevention. And my point to this is that prevention is a fallacy. Okay. In spite of the fact of law enforcement being really good at what they do, organized law enforcement has been around for about 300 years now, since it began in Europe. And there's still crime. Okay. So we're not preventing anything. What are we doing? Okay. Well, I would argue law enforcement is doing their job because they basically kind of keep a lid on things. They keep honest people honest, and they're there to apprehend bad people when they do bad things. We're not preventing anything, though. And the reason why I want to talk about prevention versus preparation is because if we start using that term prevention in our mindset when we're writing our crisis plan, or we're doing our training in our communities, so we're going to prevent. What we do is we take ourselves to a place that now we've done enough. We did everything that Ryan and Bill told us to do. We must be safe. Now we can move on to the next task. We put check in that box, close the book, and forget about it, because now we've prevented it from happening. And what you're really doing is you're just basically put yourself back in that complacency place now. Okay. What I want to take your mind from is away from prevention and into preparation. And just that shift right there is so important, because prevention, okay, that's stopping something from ever happening. Okay. Preparation is getting ready for something that's going to happen. And you see right there that mindset change. Okay. Because you're not going to put some effort into really planning for something if it's really not going to happen to you, or you don't think it's going to be, you're not at risk for it. If your community is in South Florida, you probably don't have to have snow days in your crisis plan, okay? Because it's just not going to happen. So you're not going to prepare for it. You're not going to put time and effort into it, okay? But if you're in preparation mindset, okay, you truly believe, or you at least somewhere in your mind, you understand this could happen to us and we need to be ready for it. That changes the whole mindset of your approach to this process. Now, some steps are preventative in nature. Okay. And so we can be preventative, but I want you to take that prevention or that prevent thing out of your mindset. Risk managers, and I'm delving into Ryan's world a little bit here, but I remember them telling me things like this: is a predictable risk is a preventable risk. And to a degree, I agree with that. Okay. A trip hazard that's on your community, that's predictable. You're made aware of it. You go out and you fix it. You've just prevented that risk from happening now, that trip from happening that fall. Okay. Tornadoes, well, maybe not so much time, but let's say hurricanes are predictable. Okay. But we can't prevent them. We have to prepare for them. And so that's that mindset I just want to have everyone to kind of understand is we're not prevention, we're preparation. And when you truly get in that preparation world, you're basically giving yourself permission to believe this can happen to me. And so you take that ifs out and you put in the whens and say, not, well, if this happens, let's say when this happens, I will do this. I can't tell you my favorite story is I was doing an assessment at a location. And one of the things that I was asking one of the stakeholders, one of the leaders is, what are you going to do if this happens, if X happens, if Y happens, just kind of getting the lay of the land. And basically their response was they were going to throw a fire drill at everything that happened and hope for the best, And so the scenarios that I was giving them, they really didn't have a plan for, not because they never really thought that would happen to them. ultimately the response was, well, I'm not really sure what I'll do, but I'm sure I'll do the right thing. And then my answer to them, or my question to them, is, why are you sure? If you've never been through this before, you've never experienced this before, you've never planned or even let your mind even think about being here before, why do you think you're going to do the right thing? No one ever makes good decisions under crisis. And so when we get into that preparation mindset, we're letting our mind go to that place, even in, tabletop exercise or in safe under blue skies, to say, let's prepare for this now, to say, when this happens, we'll do this. And then when this happens, and expect that things are going to break. People aren't going to do their job. Batteries are going to fail. Expect all those things to happen in your plan, so that your plan A probably isn't going to look like plan A when the event's done. It's going to be plan F probably by the time you get there, but at least it's not the first time you've ever seen it before.
Which I think that perfectly segues into our vulnerability assessment. Bill, if you can briefly touch on vulnerability assessment, don't want to get too far in the weeds here, to be conscious of time. And then this is going to be our next conversation as well. Right. But could we talk about creating a vulnerability assessment?
And remember, next month, we're going to go and take a look at a deeper look at actually building a vulnerability assessment or updating yours. AccuShield has made a really good tool, and that's going to be coming out, right, Ryan? It's going to be sent out. Self-assessment tool to kind of give yourself a little bit of a lay of the land. This is not your vulnerability assessment. So this is just kind of see where you're at and measure your location right now. A true vulnerability assessment is going to be a good, honest look at your community, not just your community, but the things surrounding your community, not just things surrounding your community, but your people, okay, your residents, your staff, your visitors, your vendors. Not just the people. Now look at your traffic, look at your parking, look at your storage. When's the last time you looked at where your cleaning supplies are kept? If you have MSD sheets for each of your cleaning supplies, okay, all those things are going to be in your vulnerability assessment. It's going to be a big task, okay. But you're going to take a good hard look at what I do when I go there. Is I'll start from the close-up things, and I start getting broader and broader and broader. When I say close-up things, I mean individual rooms, hallways, lighting, exits. Then I get out to buildings, then I get all the way out to the outside of the facility or the campus, and then I get out to the surrounding to look at what's on the outside that might be influencing you. It might not be your problem, but it came to visit you, even though it wasn't your problem. The chlorine storage facility, the railway that's near your campus, that chemicals are transported across. So a vulnerability assessment is going to look at all those things that are possible problems for you. Okay, and it's going to give you at least a peek at what you need to plan for, because before you can write a crisis plan, you need to know what you're planning for, right? Yeah. And that's what our vulnerability assessment is going to tell us.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. I believe there's a way to download some of this self-assessment right now in the chat here, but we will also be following up, sending that out, and we'll follow more on digging in deep dive into it later next month.
And just remember that assessment, that's not your vulnerability assessment tool. That's just, like I said, that's an assessment to kind of see where you stand at right now. On the front end, when our poll said we have a comprehensive security plan. Okay. I'd be curious to see what that poll says at the end of this session, to see, well, maybe it's not as comprehensive as I thought it was, because the more you find out, the more you learn, the more you realize, there's a lot more work to do. And by the way, that vulnerability assessment, that's not a one and done thing either. That's something that should be revisited regularly. We're going to take a look at this thing, maybe even annually, and have a committee or a team that does it. Because things change, right? Our population changes, the terrain outside of our community changes, and so we're going to want to make sure we're staying current with that.
And that rolls right into creating a risk assessment and risk index, actually. Right.
So after you get that vulnerability assessment done, which is going to be probably your biggest lift, or your heaviest lift, anyways, you're going to have a lot of things you're going to say, man, we got problems coming from everywhere, right? What the risk index is going to do is going to help prioritize all of those vulnerabilities for you. Okay. In my works with the schools. Okay. Usually when people called me, they wanted active shooter training, active shooter assessment, that sort of thing. When I told people that's what rang the phone. Okay. But when I got to their property, I found they had so many more problems that really need to be dealt with now. Now, active shooter is a risk. It's a problem. But compared to some of the other things they had, it was a very low risk. Okay. They had things that right now on your campus there's problems that you shouldn't let people back on until this thing is fixed now. These are life safety items right now. And so what the risk index is going to do is going to help us prioritize our vulnerabilities so that we can approach these things. Instead of eating a whole elephant, we're going to eat one plate at a time, right? So it breaks them down and prioritizes them so we can put proper resources, proper money, and proper time management towards taking care of these things. And that risk index is going to show us basically, what's our true life safety problems, what's our cost problems, or liability problems, what's going to close our campus or our facility or our community today. And then the things that we can maybe put long-term planning on. And so using that risk index, again, it's a phased process, because initially we need to do a vulnerability assessment to figure out what we're vulnerable to. Then we're going to do a risk index to prioritize that thing. And then we're going to start approaching each one of those problems, making sure our crisis plan addresses all of the things we learned in the vulnerability assessment, the risk index.
Yeah, absolutely. That's right on right there. We're looking at this poll a little bit longer, giving a moment for people to step through. And then I think after this, we're going to touch on a little bit of how AccuShield can play in to your policies and procedures, and specifically more so on the procedures than the policy. How do we get the human behavior changed using a tangible touch point to help get that idea and the culture of safety and security instilled in everyone?
Numbers are moving around a little bit there, but I think most would probably agree they could use improvement. Listen, I spent 16 years as a SWAT operator in a pretty large agency. And in that, we wrote plans. We wrote plans for operations. We trained plans for operations. Before we'd actually do an operation, we'd actually make little tape diagrams in the ground of the house that we were going to, and we'd walk through and do rehearsals. These are people that do this for a living, right? And we rehearse these things step by step, with equipment on, with gear on, with tools in our hands, because you didn't see the little problems until you actually walk through them and plan with them, and then getting out of the van and tried all of our communications and everything. Every time we did an operation, we did this. And I can tell you that everyone in that van, when we went to an operation, knew exactly what their job was, and they knew what the guy's job behind them was and the guy's job in front of them was, because we expected things to break. We expected somebody to trip and fall, step out of the van and slip and break an ankle, whatever the case was. Someone else had to do that job because we couldn't stop, And so I used to say, we always have a plan A, okay? But SWAT always wind up working with plan F, because, A through E always wind up failing. The bad guys don't do what bad guys are supposed to do. They don't play by the script all the time. Equipment doesn't always work, or the door was supposed to open in and open out. Well, that changes everything when you're standing on the outside of that door, So plan A is great, but having that crisis plan, then being flexible with it. And the only way you really learn if that plan works is testing it, drilling it, tabletopping it, and then talking to the people. Back to the policy procedure part of it. You can write the greatest policy in the world, but when your staff says that's impossible for me to accomplish that task, and do the regular job, because don't we all have regular jobs supposed to be doing here in this community too, right? So you want me to do all these other things and somehow get my job done, So we need to make sure our procedure, it's reasonable and doable for your staff. You're not driving them into the ground either.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's all about that security you can see too. And there's actually a question here that says, how do you sell to your residents that security is an inconvenience for their safety? And what we believe is really important with that is the friction is the product. The friction is the idea of, we are that barking dog. We are the beware of dog sign, the ADT. When someone walks in a community and they see everyone's on a little bit higher alert, antennas are up, and there's a process guiding everyone through one spot, collecting that information. We've had communities where people have walked in, seen a kiosk, turned around and walked back out. We don't know what could have happened there. We don't know what they were there to do, but we've had times where we'll scan driver's license or we'll ask for a driver's license and someone just leaves. And we don't think that that person was there to go on a tour if they're not willing to do those things. Probably some more slightly, we're guessing, nefarious reasons, but those begin at the front desk. It's all about that first impression. And residents, if they're independent living, we're not going to need them to sign in. They come and go as they wish. They are free to do, as they are. But with assisted living, memory care, skilled, When they're a licensed bed, that means they're licensed to your care. You're, as much as we say that they're still on their own and their residents' rules and rights, there still is some liability with that capital L for everything that does occur in your building to any of them. And that's what AccuShield is. It's security you can see, similar to that airport where everyone's in it together. They come on the intercom, you see something, you say something. And that's how we talk about it with residents, is in any other location, as Bill said, with the neighborhood watch, people are involved. They're working together to keep each other and themselves safe. We want that same sense of community and sense of awareness and proactive pride in security that we would in our own neighborhood.
Yeah, I don't think we want to put a TSA checkpoint at the front of our communities, okay? But we want to make sure that people feel safe, okay? And you know, I think I think it was Benjamin Franklin said that free people will gladly give up a portion of the freedom to feel safe. But we don't want to go to the point where we're encumbering people, we're making them uncomfortable. You know, we're not doing a TSA checkpoint and doing pat downs and wanding people, okay? But there is a level of accountability. And back to my CENTCOM story, okay? When was the last time you heard of a retail theft at Central Command? It doesn't happen because they have an excellent security posture. You know, and you know, somewhere in between, you know, again, not going into the world of paranoid, but staying in the world of caution. Somewhere in between is a responsible caution that says that we're vigilant, we're aware, we see you, and we have a plan so that, you know, it might not be a human crime, it might be natural disaster, that I'm ready. I feel confident that the residents that count on me know that I'm going to take care of them should event X happen. And we have a plan to protect them, protect their property, protect their privacy, to make sure that we're accountable to them. Otherwise, you know, they're going to go someplace else where somebody is going to take care of them, because that's really why they're there. They want to be, at least to a degree, taken care of.
And so we've talked about this already, but we've pulled this data through our communities that we work with right now. And an average 150 unit senior living community sees over 238 unique visitors and vendors per month. That's almost 3,000 a year. And how many would they be if we weren't collecting any of those data? Yeah. These are family, friends, clergy, volunteers, home health. I could list that whole thing there. I'm not going to, but just trying to give you guys a little bit of visual based off the data on how many people are interacting with our residents. And that's really what AccuShield's here to do. We are that sign in, sign out kiosk that will help prevent, or help to prevent. I'm glad I said help there. We are not the silver bullet. We are not the only solution that is going to stop people from coming in. Like Bill said, it's not a TSA pre-check, but what we do is we create that sense of security and the peace of mind through the use of resident alerts. If somebody's there who's not supposed to be there to see a certain resident, or if a certain resident leaves that's not supposed to be able to, we can alert our caregivers, we can alert our nurses, our executive directors, and move from there to respond. But that's more reactive. What's proactive for us is name badging. And this is probably the meat and potatoes, the bread and butter of what AccuShield does. It's not just digitally storing that information, but presenting a name badge so we can identify who that person is, what their name is, and why they're there. So we can print different name badges for a family or guest, a volunteer, service provider, or staff. So what our policies were in my communities when we used AccuShield was that every person, regardless of what position you are in the building, either has to wear the uniform with their name stitched on it like they're a chef, or a name badge. If they're a CNA caregiver, we know those are state regulations, just to start with. So if we saw someone who wasn't in a uniform, who didn't have a name badge, or didn't have an AccuShield name badge, that was the prompt to walk up to them and say, excuse me, who are you, but nice to meet you. My name's Ryan. Can I grab you something to drink? And can I ask what you're here to do, who you're here to see? And if you wouldn't mind walking with me back up to the front desk, we'll get you a name badge printed out real quickly and get you signed in. And this is how we make that action, where it's the see something, say something, and really get proactive with it, because door locks are great, cameras are great, but again, we know some door locks may fail and some cameras are reactive. We're going to it after the fact. Cameras aren't setting off an alarm that somebody they don't recognize has walked in the building. We've already probably made the police report, then we go and check cameras. Right. So name badging is very proactive.
So I worked for the 14th largest sheriff's office in the nation. And of that sheriff's office, of all the employees that work for there, only about 1/3 are actually law enforcement. The other 2/3 are what we call civilian or support personnel. They don't wear uniforms. In that sheriff's office, probably one of the more, you would think, secure buildings that we have in our county, everybody had to wear a picture name badge. And, 2/3 of those people were in civilian clothes, plus, of course, the detectives were all in civilian clothes. Nobody knows all 3,500 people that work in that building. But I can tell you this, is if you walked around without a name badge, you wouldn't walk very far before somebody was approaching you and saying something. And that was in a police department. So if we're that good there, I mean, if we're requiring that much there, why wouldn't we care for our senior community in the same manner?
Absolutely. It all comes down to the prioritization and what do we care about and how do we show that we care.
Right, right.
We talked about this a little bit earlier too, but not just name badging. AccuShield will also give you all the historical data to help with any investigations that are needed to look back on what happened, what could have happened, as well as you can print that evacuation report at any time off of an app, off of the computer, off of the name badge scanner itself. Just given the tools, so if fire, flood, something does occur, you can print it, hand it to first responders real quick, instead of running around, knocking on every door, trying to figure out where everyone is.
Exactly. And that's the reunification process. That's accountability, whether it be during an active shooter, during a fire event or a chemical spill event. Picture the fire department shows up at your community tomorrow with all their bunker gear on and masks and everything, and they knock on your door and they tell you that there's a chlorine spill in the area. You have 20 minutes to evacuate or shelter in place. What are you going to do? Can you tell them right now how many souls are on your property right now? And then do you have a process or a plan on moving all those people? Some of them can't be moved, maybe, depending on what kind of a community you have. But to be able to show those incident commanders, these are who we have, these are who's going to be staying here. This is my list right now that you can give them. That's so important. I've worked on that side of the National Incident Management System and those incident command systems where with that data, our jobs would have been so much easier. But we didn't have that data back then. But now we do, and there's no excuse not to use it, to be honest with you.
And again, this is about using our resources. First responders, law enforcement, they're another resource that's available to us. And we're helping get their data or get data to them that is helpful in securing our location, and not just that one building, but the community as a whole. Right. If we're able to find, and we have as AccuShield been able to identify theft rings that have occurred by using sign in and sign out data, we're able to, give those over to law enforcement and have those alerts triggered when they walk into a different community to call the police and know that this person may have stolen from, 50 different residents over the past year or so. And we're able to not just help our residents in our community, but everyone as a whole. And we do have at AccuShield enhanced security options. If just that name badge, just that kiosk isn't quite enough, we can also do some driver's license scans to truly confirm identities right then and there. Can't use any emails, any phone numbers, anything else right off that driver's license. We can do facial recognition as well. That's under 2 seconds. It's in, it's out, and we can, have some triggers and alerts that go along with that. But sometimes most importantly is credentialing. We can verify the credentials of all third-party caregivers and vendors that come into our building. And this is important for 2 different reasons. I know we're at time here, but I'll finish up here. Is number one is if we sign a business agreement with, a staffing agency or a home health company, we are just assuming because of that business agreement and their workers' comp insurance that they submit, that they're going to make sure everybody has been background checked, everyone has a CNA, everyone's gone through, the sexual abuse check, registry, and all of those different things. But what shows to us as a community that that agency or that company has actually done those things? Yes, we may be protected to be able to subrogate through insurance, and it may not come out of our end of liability in the end, but someone who is a resident in your care or a staff member, family member could still possibly be affected by that. And what we know more than anything is reality is that's where we are. It's perception is reality more than anything else. So it's negative PR to the community, could hurt sales, and could be looked at as not a safe place to stay anymore. Just because nothing came out of your pocket hard financially doesn't mean it's not hurting your soft costs in the long run.
Right. Right.
And I think we're just about done here. If we have any questions and answers, we'd love everybody to join us next month when we dive into the risk assessments and risk and vulnerability assessments and risk indexes a little bit further. It was almost a tongue twister for me there. We've been speaking and focused for an hour and wrapping it up.
Yeah, like I said, in the vulnerability assessment process, there's a lot of weeds to get into. I wouldn't recommend trying to go out and do it your first time on your own. At least get some assistance, and we're going to talk more about that in September, how to approach that, where you can get some of that help from, then how to use that risk index as a tool, and then get down into the dirty side of actually writing that plan. And I think more long term, then we talking about the follow up to that is actually testing the plan. It could be the greatest plan in the world, but if it's never been tested or drilled, you don't know. So we're going to talk about testing that plan, how you do drills on your community, or how you see what happens when that plan is actually put down to a gray sky type event, and then updating that plan and making it a living document. We keep that thing as our Bible for our community, and it constantly make sure it's being updated. That it's otherwise, why put the work into it? Why even do it then if you're not going to use it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I know we're over a little bit. Thank you all for joining us. We'll let you get back to your busy lives. Thanks for spending a little bit of time with us here.